Welcome to DubLife Diaries, the podcast where passion meets the open road. I'm Joe Person, your host, and also a lifelong dubber. Buckle up, because this ride is just beginning. This podcast is sponsored by Volksmania magazine. Good times, great cars, awesome Volksmaniacs. Visit Volksmania.com to learn more about this class-leading VW magazine. All right, welcome back to DubLife Diaries. What if your blood ran through with gasoline and your heartbeat to the rhythm of an air-cooled engine? Adam Simpson doesn't just love Volkswagens, they are him. Since the age of 3, he has lived, breathed, and bled Beetles. We'll hear a little joke on that too. Today, he joins me to share his story that spans 37 years, 30 VWs, and an entire family transformed by a single obsession. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Adam Simpson. What's up, man?
How's it going?
It's going good, brother. It's going good. I get to hang out with you for the next hour, so life is good. We get to talk dubs.
For sure. I never get tired of that.
Right on. Before we dive into this thing today, I know this is going to be a great episode. I do want to shout out my sponsors. First up, Volksmania magazine, the flyest VW magazine on the face of the planet. U.S. subscribers, if you haven't checked them out, please do. Volksmania.com. Use DubLife, like the name of the podcast, DubLife10 at checkout to get 10% off your subscription. Also, this episode is sponsored by Salty Dub. saltydub.com. All right, back to you, my man. Back to you. This podcast is all about you. So back to you. Reading through your stuff, you don't really ever hear that somebody, gets a Volkswagen when they're 3, so this is cool. So what's your actual earliest VW memory? Because I know we don't really remember stuff at 3, but I mean, maybe you do, right?
My earliest memory, it's very spotty, but I do remember at 3 years old. It's actually getting that car. Yeah. I have very spotty, vague memories, but I do remember bits and pieces of that. I remember the guy had a few Volkswagens sitting around his house, and I remember pointing at that one and saying, I want that one. My grandmother's trying to get me to look at another one, and I want that one. And I remember seeing the tow truck pull it away. And then I remember it being in our driveway, and it had no front seats in it. And I remember standing up where the front seat should be. And my eyes are level with like the top of the dash. I can barely see over the bottom of the windshield. I'm holding the steering wheel, and both doors are open. And that's, it's very vague, but those I do remember that.
Wow, man, that's a killer memory. Tell me about your aunt's Beetle. What do you exactly remember about your aunt's Beetle? Is it actual true memories, or is it just kind of flashes? Like,
I don't remember anything about her Beetle.
You don't?
Everything I've heard is secondhand. So, because it was gone before it being gone was the reason I got the 59.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can tell you the secondhand stories I have of how that happened.
I'd love to hear how your grandparents ended up buying you this, right? This has got to be the coolest story ever. Like I said, most people don't get a VW at 3.
That's very true. It's one of my favorite questions when I had that car on the road was people would ask, how long have you had it? And I'd tell them, and they start, how old are you? And then, was it like your dad's car? And no, it's always been mine. But my grandfather bought my aunt a Beetle. She was a teenager, and she wasn't into them. It was just the 80s. They were cheap cars. She was a 16-year-old. So, and my family said that for whatever reason, and my mother and I lived with my grandparents and her brother and sister at the time when I was very young. And they said that just for whatever reason, they don't know why, I just took to that car and would always want to ride in it. I started pointing out other Beetles on the road. And then when she wrecked the car on her way to school one morning, and then it sat beside our driveway for a while. And they said I would stand up in my bed and point out the window at it. And I was about 2.5 when we got some snow, which is not common in Alabama. So my mom and my grandfather took me outside, bundled me up, took me outside to see the snow. And my grandfather says I was just begging to be, put down, didn't want to be held. So he put me down, and I made a beeline to that Beetle. And there's actually a photo my mother has where she called my name, and I turned my head, and she snapped a photo, and I'm running, and you can see the Beetle and very faintly in the background. And she said, that's what you were doing. You were running to that car.
Wow.
And after that, they would let me play in the car. and came home one day and it was gone. My grandfather had sold it, and I was not happy. I pitched a fit, and being the only grandchild at that point, I was totally spoiled by my grandparents. So they decided they would buy me just an old junker Beetle to play in. And we lived out in the country, so having an old junk car sitting in the yard was, almost a requirement. So that's how that began. So he found this person that lived close by who had, Volkswagen sitting around, and there I had my Beetle and brought it home. He put a couple of 5-gallon buckets in there as seats. So I had literal bucket seats, and I would sit in that car and drive everywhere in the world without ever leaving the backyard.
Yeah, man. The imagination of a kid. So
Mm-hmm.
that was you. You picked that one out, right?
I did. Yeah.
What was it about this 59 that made you just say that this is the one?
I don't know. I'd have to go back to being 3 years old. I
Yeah.
say it was some VW intuition because they've told me from what they can remember that the other Beetles there were later models.
Okay.
And so I picked the 59, and I picked the one that's a Euro car. Not that I knew what Euro cars semaphores were, but that's the one I ended up picking.
Wow.
And my grandfather paid $60 for this car.
Oh my goodness. That's why it got to be a record of
Yeah. So this was 1988. So
yeah. So how does that memory feel now though? So as an adult, looking back now, literally an entire lifetime around having this same car.
it's pretty wild because, of course everything changes from age 3 to, at age, I'm almost 40 now, and everything changes. Your entire life changes in so many ways, but
Right.
that's the one constant thing. It was always there.
Man. Yep.
Whether I ended up, even when my mother and we moved out, I became the oldest of 3 brothers. It was still at my grandparents' house, waiting for an imaginary adventure. And then when I got older, I got it running and actually drove it. So it's pretty wild.
It's pretty awesome. I was so eager to have this conversation when I started reading through some of the details. So your passion for VWs now has spread to your dad and your youngest brother, right?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, even though like no one in my family after my aunt had a Beetle, I had a distant relative, a great aunt in Chattanooga who drove one. And I rode in that one when I was a kid. But other than that, I would just see them on the road. And I was always trying to get everyone to buy a Volkswagen, little elementary school kid trying to convince everyone they need a Volkswagen. And when I was about 9 years old, my dad decided he would buy a Beetle. He's a car guy, but he was always, V8, Ford, no replacement for displacement, that kind of guy. And he decided he'd get something that was, decent on gas because everything he had was a V8 and he was driving a pretty good distance to work. So he bought the 73 Beetle. And I remember him saying, I was right before I turned 10 years old. And I remember him saying that he would drive it for a few years. And then once I got to high school, I could drive it. Well, by the time I was in high school, he had 3 Volkswagens and I wasn't getting any of them. So he ended up liking them a little bit more than he thought.
Yeah, he spawned.
Yeah. And then my youngest brother, he's 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
And he was always like my little sidekick. He always wanted to do whatever I did. So when I was working on Volkswagens, he wanted to come out there and help me. And I would take him with me to little events, little cruise-ins we'd have when I was, 16, 17 years old, and he's 6, 7 years old. And then when he got a little bit older, I taught him how to drive a stick. He was 12 in the 64 bus I had at the time. So it's just solidified that for him. And he has 2 water cools, but he also has a 62 bus.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's, I spread it to everyone basically.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Have you ever thought about like maybe who wouldn't be in your life if VWs didn't exist? Because when I was writing these questions for you, I actually put myself in this question and I was like, man, who wouldn't be around me? And I started going down my list and I was like, damn, there's
Yeah.
some really cool people that wouldn't be a part of my life if it wasn't for VW. So talk to me about that.
I think the shorter list would be who would be in my life if it weren't for Volkswagens, because
Okay.
I mean, my best friends I met because of VWs, either at a show or through a club we used to be in, or something like that. And then I have so many friends that I know that maybe they're friends of those people that I met because of Volkswagens. I call them VW adjacent, and then maybe they're in the cars, but not necessarily Volkswagens. My best friend is like a brother to me. I mean, and I've gotten 2 jobs because of Volkswagens, because of friends I knew through the VW scene that could put in a word for me, and That's how I got the jobs. The job I have currently, that's how I got that job. So I don't even know. It's been, I didn't know a life before it. So I can tell you when I was a kid, when I was probably in the third grade, and you have to do your spelling words and you have to write a sentence on each spelling word. My teacher limited me to only writing one sentence about Volkswagens because I would find a way to make every word to write a sentence about VWs. And I was limited to just one about Volkswagens because it didn't matter what the word was. I would try to make it about VWs.
This was cool when I saw it. You said that your grandmother at one point said that your blood cells must be shaped like beetles and buses.
Mm-hmm.
That was funny, man.
Yeah, she said they're zipping through my veins like highways.
That is so awesome. So back to this teacher, your kindergarten teacher. She ran into you recently, right? And asked you if you're still into VWs?
Yeah, I was in my 20s when I ran into her, probably early to mid 20s. And yeah, it was, I recognized her. She recognized me and we're talking. She, how are you doing and everything? And they said, do you still like Volkswagens? And I pointed outside. I was at the job where I was working at the time, and I pointed outside and I was like, well, does that answer your question? Because actually my 59 Beetle was sitting outside. I'd driven it to work that day. And I told her something, and she said this was really touching. When it was the end of my first grade year, and she came up to me. It's one of those very vivid memories. I was at the water fountain, and she came up to me and said the library was discarding a bunch of books, and she found this one and thought I would like it. And it's this kind of kid book about BWs. It's from the 70s, pretty old and tattered. And I still have that book to this day. And I told her, I said, I still have that. She's like, that's insane. And I was like, no, I still have that book. I really do. And then when, we found each other on social media and I sent her a picture and I was like, see, I told you, I still have this book. It's taped together and tattered, but I still have it.
That is absolutely awesome, man. And then to have somebody recognize, and then now it's really cool. Back when you were growing up, it wasn't the coolest thing yet
No,
to have a Volkswagen. Now it's super cool to have one.
Right.
Right.
I mean, there were no other kids in elementary school who were obsessed with Volkswagens. It was just me.
Yeah. I can appreciate
I'm
that.
so grateful to my family for not discouraging it. They were just like, okay, this kid likes VWs. We'll just go with it. Even though it wasn't the norm. Like, okay. I mean, I was into all your normal kid stuff. I played video games. I watched the cartoons everyone else watched and everything, but I dig into arguments at school that the Ninja Turtle van was in fact a Volkswagen. I guess that could be a funny memory from when I was a kid. I remember getting in arguments with that because I remember the sticker on it and it had the engine. It was an air-cooled Volkswagen engine. I know it was. And
awesome.
I posted on Facebook a while back. There was something from the Ninja Turtles where it was like a comic book, and then the original comic book, it was more blatant that it was a VW. And I was like, to all my elementary school friends who argue with me, I was right. It's a VW.
That's great. I want to talk about your show. You got a show you've been a part of since 2005.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, I was in a club that started when I was a teenager, and we started doing a show, and we did it at a different location for the first 2 years. And in 2005, one of my good friends, one of those very close friends of mine that I met because of VWs, he took over the show and wanted to move it to this park at Tannehill. And there was a little bit of some tension with the other people didn't want to move it, but I stuck by my friend and I helped him out. And it was myself and him and a couple other guys that we planned it to revamp it at this new location with a new date and everything. So I was instrumental in that from the beginning.
What's the name of this show?
The show is the Tannehill Volks Jam.
Volks Jam. Okay.
Yes.
So you've probably heard of Bug Jam. We've got Bug Jam down here.
I've been there a few times. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good stuff. So you took over running the show in what, 2011?
Yes, that's correct.
And what'd you bring to the table? What changed from 2011 to now?
The club sort of started to fracture, and some of us left around 2009 to 2010. My core group, we were not involved. And then in 2011, we got word that they'd canceled it. So we took it upon ourselves to go and uncancel it. So we went to the park, we pulled together some of our own money and had a couple of sponsors. And we just put on very simple, because we did it in just a couple of months. But we kept it alive and kind of slightly changed the name because it was called Bug Blast back then. We slightly changed the name and we kept it going. And I wasn't even I didn't even try to be the head of the show, but everyone started coming to me and asking me questions and asking me what to do. And I was like, well, if you guys want me to be in charge, fine, I'll be in charge, whatever. I'll be the one in charge. So, and then it's grown from then. We changed the name just to distance from the original in 2014, changed it to Bulk Jam, but it's always been the fourth Saturday in August. As far as the changes that I've made since I've been the head of it, it's more of just a hangout. It's a very casual kind of thing. All the trophies are handmade. They're either made by a friend of mine, and actually my mom and dad helped make a lot of the trophies as well.
Oh, cool, man.
We have, it's just a real low key hangout. It's become an event where we have a camp out the whole weekend as well. I
Nice.
started doing a Friday night cruise to a little barbecue stand down the road for the people who were there and camp out and come the night before as it's grown. I tried to keep it the way it was in the beginning, just a simple, laid back hangout for Volkswagen people.
How do you keep your Volkswagen people entertained at an event like this? Is it truly just chilling? Do you provide like activities or anything to keep people busy?
That's actually something I've thought of doing lately. I've been kind of thinking about that, if there's some sort of games we could do or something like that. My friend Todd, the one that started moved it to Tannehill originally, he's the DJ, and he was a professional DJ on radio for many years. And he keeps people entertained. He does all this sort of trivia stuff with both VWs and with music he plays. And if you get the trivia right, get there the first, you win a prize or something like that. So he's very entertaining on the on the microphone for sure. So that's a big part of it. And then the park itself is a really cool venue. It's a very historic place. There's all kind of old buildings and old ironworks there. So
Yeah, cool.
if you get more looking at Volkswagen, there's a lot of things you can do at the park itself. But I have been thinking that that's something I may add is, I don't know, maybe some sort of games for people to play or just something like that just during the day.
Putting together an event, I've put together events too. I know, it can come with some stresses.
Yeah.
What's one of the most stressful things that's happened behind the scenes that you really kind of keep to yourself?
One year I went to pick up all the shirts, and I'd had someone else do the order, and they were about $1,000 more than I thought they were going to be.
Oh my
And, yeah.
That's a lot of money, bro.
I was like, this is just a few people doing this. It's not some, a lot of sponsors event. Like, I can't do this. So we worked out something with with the printers, and they put their logo on it and put a discount like they were a sponsor and everything. But that was probably the most stressful thing, because it was just a few days before. And I'm like, if I don't have shirts, people are going to go crazy.
Dang.
So that was the most stressful thing that's probably ever happened.
Okay. How about life lessons? What's some of the biggest life lessons you've learned? You've been involved since 2011. That's a long time. That's enough time to really, factor some things. What would you say are some of your biggest lessons learned by running VW events?
No matter what you do, you're never going to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
There's always going to be someone that's not happy, and you can't let that bother you. When the majority of people say they're having a good time and they love it, don't pay attention to the couple of people who they're not happy.
That's good. That's good advice. And I think, depending on a personality type, it's almost common for somebody to take that one complaint and harp on it forever. And I value what you said. Don't take that one, the 1%, we call it, of the population.
Right.
Don't take the 1% and act on it. Like, worry about what the 99% said.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm always open to new ideas or constructive criticism for sure. And people have given great ideas that I've done and have worked out great. The Friday night dinner cruise is one thing that was suggested by one of the guys that comes up from New Orleans, and that was a great idea, and it's been a big success. But it's just the person that I should have won a trophy and I didn't. And
yeah, any emotional or funny or even completely wild moments at a show that have stuck with you over time?
Well, emotional, I can definitely think of that one. In 2019, one of the core guys that helped put on the show, someone I'd known since I was a teenager, passed away suddenly a few months before the show. And that year we dedicated the show to him. My friend Brad, who does amazing artwork, he did the artwork was of that guy's name was Jim, was in his VW thing pulling into the campground. That was the shirt that year. I had a collage of photos of him at VW shows over the years, because his mother and his sisters were going to show up and some other family members. Years ago, I remember sitting after the show and talking about a certain car that didn't win anything. And I was like, that was my favorite car here. It should have won something. And I was like, I should just make an award that just, this is Adam likes this car, so it deserves an award. And he joked, he said, well, you should do it. You're the head honcho. You're the head guy. You can do whatever you want. So after he passed away, I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. And it's going to be in honor of him. And he always would come up to his cars and say, that's a sweet little ride. And the way he said it was very funny. So I call it the Sweet Little Ride Award. And it's just a car that I really like for no reason other than just it's the one I like.
Yeah.
And,
You don't have to give a reason. You're the man.
yeah, exactly. I was like, I just like this car. I think it's really cool. Sometimes I'll tell people why. Like, I love original cars. So I gave it 1 year to a car that was just very worn, but everything was totally original on it. Anyway,
Yeah, no,
but
it's cool.
yeah, but having to that, especially that year, talking about him and explaining the what the award was and why we were giving it out, and I barely made it through that. I choked up multiple times, and
I
every
bet.
year I try to explain. It's gotten easier, so that was in 2019, so it's gotten easier. But I still get a little choked up when I explain, because I have to explain that award every year because there's new people, they don't know what it is. So I try to explain it, and that's probably the most emotional moment I've had at the show was that because and every year I catch myself looking for him to pull in, and kind of hits you every year that
Yeah.
he's not going to be there.
Oh man, yeah, that's rough, man. I've lost some friends myself, throughout my childhood and into my age now. I'm 47, bro. It's like they're dropping all around me.
Hmm.
It's like wow, it's yeah, and some of them suddenly as well. You mentioned Brad, and you said he does good artwork. Shout him out real quick so the listeners can find him. Is he on Instagram or anywhere?
Yes, he's on Instagram. He's Brad Carroll. He goes by it's Def Bug. I believe it's Def Bug 32. He does amazing artwork. He's done a few other shows there in the South, some of their like shirt artwork and everything. But he does other, not just VW artwork. He's a VW guy, but he does, does other automotive artwork, and he's done other. I've seen paintings he's done that were really great. And I told him for years he should try to sell this stuff. And a few years back, he actually he did it at our show, and he came up to me and he's like, everything's sold. People bought all my stuff. I'm like, I've been telling you that for years. Like, we're not just, we're not just blowing smoke up. We're serious. You're really good. So he's finally
I hope
understanding.
he comes every year and sets up and sells now.
Oh yeah, he definitely will. He's been every year in sales, and I mean, and
Good.
people look forward to his artwork because it's unique. It's his own style. I don't even tell him what to do. I just go, whatever you want. His artwork's always amazing. So, and people look forward to the shirts because they're unique. They're unique design. So,
Yeah, man, that's absolutely awesome. Let's touch on the scene in Alabama. What makes the scene in Alabama unique compared to other Volkswagen scenes around the country?
I think people, I'd say they're pretty dedicated because there's not as many of us, of course, as there would be in the West Coast or even in Florida. I can see, you got to have a show. I have a cruising in Florida, there might be 50 cars there. You have a cruise in here, and there might be 10.
Okay.
But I think that they're very enthusiastic and I'd say very dedicated. Sometimes it can be difficult to get people together. It's kind of like herding cats, but they all show up for the show every year. And I don't know if anything makes it unique. I think it's the camaraderie's. I feel the same camaraderie I do when I go to other places.
Right on. And I think that's kind of something that's just, maybe the fabric of our community. It's kind of the same regardless of where you're at. People that are willing to help each other,
Right.
that type of stuff. The vibe that the Volkswagen culture kind of ensues. It's a wonderful thing. And it's one of the reasons why I do this podcast. I like meeting guys like you. I like hearing stories, about guys that have, been in love with Volkswagen since they were little tiny kids. I mean, that's so cool, man. I've got a 5-year-old right now that obviously I've had him his whole life. But when he was 3, he started really liking, my dubs in the driveway and, taking pictures with them. And he likes to play all in them and stand. I hope one day he has stories like that. That's, that would nothing would make me feel better than to these kids to have some stories. I almost had one story recently. My 16-year-old son went to take his driver's license test and he goes, Dad, I think I want to take the test in the Gia because it's a auto clutch and it's super easy to drive. It's my wife's. It's a 71. It's a beautiful car, all original, 46,000 miles. Beautiful car. So I said, okay, let's do it. In my back, I'm going, yeah. I got one. He's going to have memories for life of taking his test in this car, right? We go get in it and the freaking horn don't work. And one of the first
Mm.
requirements for Florida is you got to have a horn that's functional. I'm like, man. So yeah, he went and took it in his mom's Audi, and yeah, there went that memory. But I got a couple other boys coming up, and I'll make sure I try to get them to test in one of the dubs for sure, so they can have that memory. All right, so going back to you and talking about being a kid, you learned to read at the age of 3, right? You credit that a lot to old VW Trends magazines and Auto Traders. What were those early days like? Do you remember it all?
Somewhat. My grandfather was always the kind of buying and trading type of guy, so he would get those auto traders, and I would sit on his lap while he looked at them. And I was just, I mean, Volkswagens were the main thing, but cars in general I love too. So, and I love learning about different cars. My family told me I would point out, I knew what each car was on the road from reading auto traders and then reading the back what the badges were on the cars. And they said the car go by, now that's a Honda Accord, that's a Ford Taurus, whatever. And my earliest actual memories of having a VW magazine are probably about 4 years old.
Okay.
I remember actually laying in the back seat of that 59 and reading a VW magazine. I know I bought a box of most of the early magazines I had didn't survive. You give a 4-year-old a magazine, it's not going to last long.
Oh God, no. Yeah.
But I bought a box of old magazines. Oh, it's probably been well 15 years ago now. And I just picked one up as when I had free time and flipped through it. And there was one that I flipped through and it hit me. I go, I remember this. I remember
Whoa.
this issue. I remember this car. I remember it.
Whoa.
And I look at the date, and the magazine was July '89, which was a month before I turned 4. So,
Dude, you do remember. That's cool.
yeah,
That's a cool story.
I didn't remember until I flipped through that magazine. I'm like, wait a minute, I know this. I remember this, and that's so I was a month from turning 4. I was at least that age when I was getting the magazines.
So I've always been a car guy myself, and something that you said, it kind of resonated. So there's two things I want to say. One's funny, one's serious. The first one's funny. Auto traders. I used to collect them, and I learned a lot about cars from auto traders, especially value. But one of the funniest things I used to do is I'd sit around with my buddies. I'd pick up the phone, I'd dial *67, and I would call people that had cars in the auto trader a year ago. And I'd say, yeah, I'm calling about the 89 Mustang 5-liter you guys got in the auto trader. And they'd go, 89, what? The one I sold a year ago? I'm like, oh, no, I don't think you sold it. It's sitting here in a new auto trader. So we used to get a kick out of that. And then the second thing that was serious was I did the same thing that you did off of kind of learning, but I did it off of the eBay app. So back in the day, eBay used to have a eBay Motors, like a separate app just for
Mm-hmm.
cars. And you could go through, like if I wanted to go through and learn all about Ford F-350s, I'd go in and I'd scroll through every picture. I'd read every description, and I'd learn about suspension and I'd learn about the mods that they were doing and the exhaust and the intakes and I would just learn everything. So by the time I'm, 16, 17, I got hired at Jiffy Lube. And I was, just going to change oil and vacuum out cars and just be like this little, courtesy tech or whatever they call them. And I remember as the cars used to pull in when I first got hired, I was 16, I was young. The cars would pull in on the drive and I could name every car and tell you about what year it was. And the manager back then, you see me, dude, how the fuck do you know every car that comes in here? Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, nothing. I thought everybody knew all the cars. Like, no, nobody knows the cars. Like,
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, I knew I was into something, way back then as well. But okay, so fast forward now to this. I want to talk about this because we're sitting here talking about magazines, VW magazines at that. Now you're writing for VW Trends.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
I've had two articles published in the magazine so far, and I'm working on a couple other ones. I went to shows in North Carolina a few weeks ago, and those are the two I'm working on, those two. So I've just a freelance thing on the side, but yeah.
What kind of stories do you want to tell in the magazine? What are you covering, shows and that type of stuff?
That's what I've done so far. I covered the show in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I covered the show in Pensacola, Florida. I like that I'm in the magazines, of course, and I understand why everything's centered on the West Coast. That's the big scene, that's where everything is. But there's so much content in the Southeast that I think is very underrepresented. So that's what I want to shine a light on is just the shows and some of the cars that are here that they never publish because they're not on the West Coast.
Yeah, man.
There's a little bit of serendipity I have to say about the VW Trends thing. I had the first article I had published was it's a quarterly magazine now. When it was brought back, it's quarterly.
Yep.
And the first one was in the summer 2023 issue. And I have a photo of me holding in one hand I have a yellow Beetle toy, in the other hand I have a VW Trends magazine, and it's the July 93 issue.
Wait, I have that picture. I think
you do have that picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately 30 years apart. I'm holding one magazine, and 30 years later, I'm in it. I have an article in it, so it's pretty wild.
So cool, man. You got.
And I have to thank Dan Ledbetter for giving me a shot because I don't have any formal, journalism training or anything like that. It was just I was like, I'm a decent photographer. I have a nice camera. I was a pretty good writer in school, and he's like, well, just see what you can do. And he said it was good. So I'm open to do more.
I value that. I feel that. I got privileged to in a similar scenario the last year. I started this podcast just in January, and right around that time I had reached out to several magazines, just asking about advertising, what's it cost type thing. And, what kind of numbers can I expect? Just the typical stuff if you're going to pay for an ad somewhere. And Paul Cave at Volksmania responded back to me, and he was like, you know what? You're not going to advertise in Volksmania. Instead, you're going to be a part of the team. We're going to bring you in. We're going to cover the podcast. And so yeah, man, he open arms. And again, these guys, they're classic culture. That's what dubbers do. We have each other's backs, and that's just it fits. It's just perfect. So tell me about your 63 bus. What's the whole backstory? What have you done to it? How long have you had it? All that good stuff.
I bought it in November of 2011, and it was one of the few air-cooled Volkswagens I bought already running and driving.
What'd you pay for it?
10 grand.
Ooh, you got a good one.
I had two other split buses that I'd sold, and I wanted to get one that was pretty nice, and for a change, one that was already running. And I'd taken some money with me. I went to Bully Brigade down in Tampa, which I know you're familiar with that.
That's this one. That's this bus, right?
That's this one. Yeah, that was behind you. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I went to Bully Brigade, and I thought it would be so cool if I bought a bus down there and drove it back. But there was nothing down there that I liked. And I'm at Bully Brigade. I get an alert on my phone that the Samba, a new ad for a split bus was posted. And it was in Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm like, and I look at it. It's a funny thing. I wanted an original paint, small hatch, walk-through bus. This was a 63 walk-through original paint bus. It's in Huntsville, Alabama, when I'm in Tampa, Florida. and, and it was in my price range. I'm like, why? So I emailed the guy. He had no phone number on the ad. I emailed him 9 minutes after the ad was posted. And we're leaving Bully Brigade. I get a message back from him. He said, well, someone from Memphis is coming tomorrow. And I'm like, I was so bummed out. And a friend that I was with, he said, oh, don't get too bummed out. That guy might back out. You never know. So I told the guy, and the guy said, you have second dibs. You're the second person to contact me. So we went to Bug Jim the next day. We're on the way home. We decided we're just going to drive all the way back to Birmingham Sunday night. And I get another email, and the guy says, well, the guy from Memphis backed out. You get second dibs. I was like, here's my number. Call me now. Call me right now. And I called him.
On my way home, baby.
Yeah, I'm like, we're on our way home. We're getting in. And I told him, I was like, we'd already taken off the next day on Monday anyway, because we thought we might stay another day. So I'm like, I'm good. I got the whole day clear. So he called me, and I told him, like, I'm very serious. When can I be at your house? He said, I'll be home at 5. I was like, I'll be at your house at 5. And so my dad and actually the friend that was with us down there at Bully Brigade, we drove up. And this guy lived in a pretty nice neighborhood in Huntsville. We pull up, and I'm at the time, I guess I'm 26. I'm wearing some greasy jeans and like a shop jacket. My dad's got like this long goatee, the tattoos on his arms. My buddy Jake was with us. He's talks like a hillbilly. I'm sure this guy was like, this guy in this nice neighborhood was like, these people are not going to buy this bus. They don't have any money.
Right.
And I was at the time I was 26. I think I was just I was working part-time. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had money from selling those buses. And I drove the bus around. I was like, I have to have it. I want this. I'm not hesitating. I'm not going to haggle with them.
Yeah.
It's worth the money. I told the guys, like, I'm not going to haggle with you. I'll take it. And he said, well, I can hold it for you. I said, no, I was going to drive it home tonight. And he goes, well, how are you going to pay? And I whipped 10 grand out of my pocket and I said, cash. And he just kind of like stumbles away and okay. And I went over to my dad and I said, I'm probably not going to get another moment like this for a long time. So I'm going to try to remember every second of how this feels to pull this wad of cash out of my pocket.
or to ever buy a 63 bus for 10 grand.
That's true.
In your
I mean,
life.
at the time, I remember thinking, I can't believe I'm paying 10 grand for a bus, but little did I know.
Right.
And then
an investment.
it definitely was. So I bought the bus. We're driving it home that night. We get about halfway there. It dies on the way home. I first of all, it was out of gas. Ended up being a fuel pump. Sitting on the side of the road. It starts to rain. My friend goes to get a fuel pump. First, he goes to get gas, and he goes to get a fuel pump. My dad and I are sitting there with the flashers on the side of the road in the rain. He gets back. By the time he gets back, and we put a fuel pump on it, the batteries went dead. Or, it's just too low because having the flashers on so long. And so we got the jumper cables hooked up to my friend's truck. And I remember I hit my point. I was like, I'm done. I'm just tired. I'm sick of this. I'm ready to be home. And my dad's in there trying to start it. I'm at the back of the bus, and my buddy Jake, he pats the back bumper, and he says, "Come on, Betsy, you can do it." And I just stopped and said, "Betsy? Where'd that come from?" He just goes, "I call all old cars Betsy's." And that's the bus's name now. I would joke when I get in and, "Come on, Betsy, you can do it." And I'd impersonate my friend. And someone asked me after a while, "Is that your bus's name?" I'm like, "Yes, that's its name." So I always impersonate him, and I say that's my old gal Betsy. She's a good old gal because that guy always called cars old gals. He was always pulling some old gal out of a field or just old gals in a garage. So he's from a small town in Alabama.
So what have you done to this thing over time?
It was already lowered when I got it, but since I've had it, since 2011, I've put 3 different engines in it. I've converted the rear to Wolfgang IRS. I've put the front discs from Type E Motorsports on it. That's probably about all the mechanical work I've done, or changes I've done to it. Of course, maintaining it and, a few different engines that were in it.
What about
the engines in it when I bought it blew up on my brother on his way to his prom.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's a story.
Yeah.
How about inside, interior?
It's all the original interior.
Is it?
With the middle seat in it. It's got a full width middle seat, even though it's a walkthrough.
Okay.
And the flipper part was missing off of the middle seat. So it's not correct, but it works. I made one out of the back of a front seat. I took the back of a bus front seat and I cut it and welded it together and kind of got the shape right and welded a little bracket onto it so it flips forward. So that it doesn't match, but it functions.
You're building a 73 Baja project right now?
Yeah. My little brother and I talked about building a Baja for a while, and it's actually the 73 Beetle that my dad bought back in 95.
Oh my goodness, man. You guys do like the coolest stuff.
Which is actually the first Volkswagen I ever drove on my own. It's that 73. And there's one of the reasons why I wanted to resurrect it. It had been sitting for like 20 years, and it's pretty beat up as it was. And basically everything that was beat up on the car, you cut off to make a Baja. So we just came up with that idea. We've made it into a Baja, and I have an engine for it, and I've got to get a transmission for it, and we have to get the time to work on it, basically. So,
talking about working on it. What's it like balancing a lot of these old school builds with your new school builds, which is you have your daily driver as a GTI, right?
Yes, a 2010 GTI.
So what's that like? The old school versus the new school?
Well, I'm pretty dumbfounded by the new school stuff. My best friend, he's kind of the opposite of me. He's more into water cooleds and has had some air cooleds as well.
Okay.
So anytime something's wrong with that car, I usually go to him and I go, "Do you know what's wrong with it?" And he'll explain it to me, and he'll see my eyes glaze over, and he'll go, "Okay, let me put this in like 1965 car terms so you understand what's wrong with your car." And he'll relate it to a carburetor and points. I go, oh, "Okay, now I get it."
Yeah.
So I like the GTI. I like the water cooleds. I've had a few of them. I don't have the passion for them. I do the air cooled. They're more of just a car that I like. I do think though that having the GTI makes me appreciate the air cooleds, and having the air cooleds makes me appreciate the GTI. When I drive my bus for a while, and I get back in the GTI, I go, "Oh gosh, I love the fact that this thing has air conditioning, and I can do 80 on the highway, and it's quiet, and it's just smooth. It's easy, even though it is still a manual. I'm a manual purist, but But then if I drive the GTI for a while and I get back in my bus, I'm like, oh God, I love this thing. You can hear it, everything. It's so mechanical, it's direct.
Feel the
It's
road.
not just, it's not just the bus isn't just routine. It makes it, I think, a little more special because I have the contrast of having something modern as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that really is, and that happens to me too. I jump in. I've got a '74 thing and a '71 Gia, and sometimes I'll jump in both of them for different reasons. Like the Gia, I'll be like, "Damn, this thing is so smooth,"
Hmm.
because it's all stock, 46,000 miles original. It's literally just a peach, and it's so quiet and so insulated and so nice and tight. I'm like, damn, this is really what it's all about. Well, then
Hmm.
sometimes I'll get in my thing and I'll be like, dude, you can drop the top. I can lower my windshield. There is nothing, no feeling unless you're driving a
Right.
motorcycle is like that, right? Unless you're on a
Right.
weight runner or in a boat or, on a motorcycle. That's about it.
I can relate because my bus has safaris. So you open those safaris and just the wind's in your face.
That's right. That's right.
And I know it's what's funny too is if I drive the bus for a while, like I went to North Carolina a few weeks ago and I drove the bus. It's probably about 1,000 miles round trip. So I was gone for 4 or 5 days, and much of that was driving. And I come back home and I get in my GTI and I feel like I'm going to take off. It feels like a spaceship and it's so fast. It's not even, in the context of just, modern cars, it's not even that fast. But obviously compared to a 1600 bus, it's
Right.
extremely fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also feel because in the bus, everyone's staring at me, they're waving, they're taking pictures. The GTI, I feel like I'm undercover because I just blend in. It's just another gray hatchback that's on the road. So
Yeah.
that's another thing too. Is if I don't drive the bus for a while, it strikes me when people, it's like, oh my gosh, people are staring at me, they're taking pictures, they're waving. I kind of that's something you have to get used to again as well.
Yeah. Everywhere you go, they
Hmm.
smile, they take pictures, they want to sit in them. They all attach memories from their childhood or
Oh
their
yeah,
high school years or something, and you always get to hear those stories. How cool is that?
very cool. And
So
my mom said that I could never go anywhere without her knowing when I was in high school because I drove a '71 Beetle in high school. And she always knew where I was because someone would say, "Oh, I saw Adam's Beetle, at this part of town. I saw Adam's Beetle over here." I mean, I couldn't hide.
I had a '72 in high school standard.
That's what I had. Yeah.
Yeah, it did have an auto clutch, but after the second year I drove it, I kind of ragged it. I was really hard on it. They couldn't find parts for that transmission or the suction or the vacuum of it way back in the day, so I had a 4-speed put in it, and then I thought it was even faster. I'm like, whoa, this thing hauls ass. It's a 1600 and it was slow. Unlimited time, unlimited budget. What's your dream VW build?
Barn door sunroof standard microbus.
Man, you had that just ready. Wait.
Yeah. The second will be a Hebmuller. That's the ultimate Beetle, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. A couple other folks have come on and they've said that too. Awesome car for sure. Absolutely. All right, I got some rapid fire style questions. These are straight off the cuff. Don't think about it too much. If a story comes out of one of them though, let's let it fly, but I'll ask you these questions, make it quick answers and let's have some fun. Ready?
All right.
All right, air cooled or water cooled?
Air cooled.
Most overrated VW of all time.
I don't know if I can pick the most overrated VW of all time.
How about underrated? What's the most underrated VW of all time?
I would say Type 3s. I've
Okay.
had a few Type 3s and I think they're super neat cars and just the design of them. I think they're really cool looking cars and the design, the two trunks, especially squarebacks. That was my favorite one I had was a squareback. And I, I don't get why they're not more popular. I mean, I get they're not the icon, but they're just such neat little cars. I really like them.
That's cool. And I agree with you. I think that a lot of the old models or the old lines, they don't get a lot of
Hmm.
sexiness or attention, but dude, they're still really cool, very well engineered air cooled cars. So and dude, I love the style. Like I love Gias, I love things, I love Volkswagens. So understand. You've had 30 of them over time though, right? Or close to.
Close to it. That counts water cooled as well, mostly air cools, but yeah.
What's one of the weirdest things you've ever found in a VW that you bought?
I bought a bay window middle seat, a full width bay window middle seat out of a junkyard. It was sitting in the back of a van again. I paid $50 for it. And I was with my dad Yeah, that's why I jumped on it. And we were in a Ford Explorer at the time, so we folded the rear seats down and slid it in the back. And my dad and I are driving home, and I feel something hit my head. We had the windows down. I thought it was a piece of fabric. I shake my head. It was a mouse. It fell off my head and into the seat. And I went from sitting on the seat to sitting on the dashboard. And I'm not scared of mice, but I mean, it was just so startling.
Yeah.
And then my dad gets mad at me for screaming. And I'm like, there's a freaking mouse in the car. We're driving on the road.
Oh my God. Dude,
Yeah.
it hit you in the head?
That explains why there was one section of the seat that had a big hole in it. The rest of the upholstery was nice. I didn't think anything of it. Oh, that's why there was a rat living in it. Or a mouse. It wasn't a big rat, it was a mouse, but still. And we stopped to eat on the way home. We still couldn't find the mouse. It hid in the car. We stopped to eat, and then it's still in the car. We drive home, and the mouse jumps up from under the seat on my dad's leg, and then back into the seat. And he gets mad at me for screaming, but I'm like, he screamed too. He still says he doesn't, but yeah, the mouse jumped on his leg when he was driving.
That is absolutely solid. What a cool story, and probably a memory that you'll hold with you forever.
Oh yeah, for sure. I probably would like to forget that, but I can't.
Yeah, but still, what a cool memory. All right, your Mount Rushmore of VW legends. Who's going to make the cut?
Oh, I'm gonna have to go historical.
Okay.
I think you have to have Ferdinand Porsche, of course. I would say Ivan Hurst, because the Brits had to save it, and Heinz Nordhoff, and
these are great answers.
Ben Pon, because he created the bus, the original sketch. So,
man,
and I love my buses. So,
yeah, great answers. What tool should you always carry in the glove box of one of your dubs?
Fire extinguisher.
Amen. Amen. Somebody says jumper cables. Others say a jump box. Fire extinguisher. That's a pretty important one. Some have also said a 10mm socket.
Yeah.
All right. If a kid today finds an old rusty Beetle in their backyard, what advice would you give them if they don't have any experience with VWs at all?
Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to break stuff, because you're going to. That's how you learn. I know a lot of people, they'll ask me for advice and they'll help me, and they think I don't make any mistakes, which I still make mistakes, of course. But if they saw the first VW that I built from one that wasn't running, which was my first split bus that I had, I broke so many things learning the hard way. But, I've told my brother, helping him work on his, I'm like, how I know how to do it this way is because I did it the wrong way and messed this part up. And I've broken brand new parts that I paid money for. And don't be afraid. Don't get discouraged. Don't be afraid of that, because that's how you learn.
Yeah, that's good advice. So on that advice tip, if somebody's listening to this podcast episode that maybe wants to get into the scene, but more importantly, maybe structure their own VW event, because that's not easy, and I know that because I do events. But if they want to structure a VW event and have it be successful, what advice would you give that person?
I would say start off very simple. Don't try to overdo it the first time. Just pick a good venue. I will do a few awards if you do any. Don't try to do too much too soon. Kind of let it grow organically. Most big shows started out small, including mine.
Any shout outs that you want to give people, events, anything like that in your area?
One person you just had on, which was Chris White of Riverbank Customs. Super cool guy.
Yeah, man.
He's not too far from me, and he is like the latest VW cheerleader for the area, because he's so good at rallying the troops to get people together to do events and do cruises and things like that. He's great at that, and he's helped me tremendously in that. He's hilarious.
He's funny as hell. He's a great storyteller. I had such a good time with him, man.
Yeah.
And he's been texting me, during the day. I look down, I see a text from him. I'm like, man, this guy, I love this guy. He's awesome. I'm glad we were able to connect. And that was, the Bug Jam, connection with Randy is kind of how that happened. He had listened to that episode and got excited. I'm glad, because, again, I built this podcast for you guys, for guys like you, guys like Chris, you guys are awesome, man. So after everything, brother, after the shows, after the builds, after the blood cells shaped like beetles, what do you think the VW life has taught you most about life itself?
Enjoy the journey, not just the destination.
And that's a wrap for this episode of DubLife Diaries. Thanks for riding along with us and diving into these incredible stories of the people in the dubs that drive their dreams. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe or hit that follow button so you never miss an adventure. Do you have a story to tell or know somebody else who's living the dub life? Awesome! Reach out to us. You can find us on all socials at DubLife Diaries, or shoot me an email. I'm not hard to find. DubLifeDiaries@gmail.com. Until next time, keep the engines humming and the wheels turning, and always follow the road that inspires you. This is Joe Person. I'm signing off. I'll catch you on the next ride.
Uh.